Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're traveling to China during one of the most spiritually dangerous times of the year, the 7th lunar month, known as Hungry Ghost Month. This is when the gates of the underworld open and restless spirits roam the living world, searching for offerings, attention, or sometimes revenge. I want to share with you what happened to a street food vendor in Chengdu who made a terrible mistake during this sacred time, and how one act of disrespect changed everything. Stay with me until the end, because I'll explain the cultural significance of Hungry Ghost Month and why millions across Asia still observe its taboos with deadly seriousness. The hungry ghosts, according to Chinese Buddhist and Taoist traditions, are spirits trapped between worlds, souls of those who died violently, without proper burial rites, or who committed great sins in life. During the 7th lunar month, the boundaries between the living and dead grow thin, and these spirits are released to wander. They're perpetually starving, with throats as thin as needles and bellies that can never be filled. The living must make offerings of food, burn incense and joss paper, and above all, show respect. Breaking these rules can invite disaster. The vendor, let's call him Chen, had run his noodle stall in Chengdu's Jinli night market for nearly 20 years. August of 2019 marked his most profitable season yet, tourists flooding the ancient streets to experience authentic Sichuan cuisine. But Chen had grown cynical over the years, dismissing the old traditions his grandmother had taught him. When Hungry Ghost Month arrived, he refused to set out the customary offerings at his stall. Superstitious nonsense, he told his wife. I'm not wasting good food on empty air. The first oddity happened on the third night of the Ghost Month. Chen was cleaning his wok around 11 p.m. when he noticed a bowl of noodles he didn't remember preparing, sitting at the small altar his wife had secretly set up behind the stall. The noodles were untouched, but the chopsticks had been moved, placed neatly across the bowl. When he asked his wife about it, she went pale. I didn't touch them after I set them out, she whispered. Chen, please, just leave the offerings alone. He laughed it off, dumped the noodles in the trash, and pocketed the coins she'd left as spirit money. The second sign came a week later. Business had been strangely slow, despite the festival crowds. Customers would approach his stall, then suddenly veer away, their faces troubled. One elderly woman actually grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You need to make amends, she hissed. I can see them gathering around your stall, 3 of them. They're so hungry, and they're angry you took what was theirs. Chen jerked away, disturbed but defiant. That night, he found his ingredients spoiled, despite being fresh that morning. The meat crawling, with maggots, the vegetables rotted black, everything reeking of decay. The escalation began during the Ghost Month's peak, the 15th day when the gates stand widest. Chen arrived at his stall around 4 p.m. to prep for the evening rush. The market was bustling, but his area felt wrong. The air too cold, too still, like walking into a refrigerator. His phone camera malfunctioned when he tried to document the spoiled food for insurance, the screen showing only static and what looked like faces pressed against glass. Then he heard it, the sound of slurping, wet and eager, coming from behind his stall where no one stood. He turned slowly, and in the gap between his stall and the next, he saw them. 3 figures, translucent in the late afternoon light, crouched over the ground where he'd dumped the offerings. They weren't eating. They were trying to, their mouths opening impossibly wide. But nothing could pass their needle-thin throats. Their bellies were grotesquely swollen, their limbs skeletal, and their eyes were fixed on him with a hunger that transcended physical need. The climax came that night. Chen tried to close early, but his hands wouldn't work properly, dropping utensils, unable to turn off the gas burners. Customers had long since stopped coming. The other vendors were packing up too, shooting nervous glances his way. "You should go," his neighbor muttered. "They've marked you." But Chen's pride wouldn't let him run. He would finish his shift, prove there was nothing to fear. At exactly midnight, when the ghost hour peaks, the three spirits manifested fully. No longer translucent, they looked almost alive. A young woman in a water-stained qipao, an old man in funeral clothes, and a child no more than 7. They sat at his counter as if they were regular customers, their hollow eyes locked on him. The woman spoke, her voice like wind through a grave. "We died in the flood of 81. No one claimed our bodies. No one burned offerings. No one remembered us. We've been hungry for 38 years. Chen's mouth went dry. The 1981 Sichuan flood had killed thousands. Many bodies never recovered. I didn't know," he stammered. "I'm sorry. I'll make offerings. But the old man cut him off. "You took what little we had. You mocked our suffering. Now you understand hunger." The child reached across the counter, her small hand passing through Chen's chest. The cold was unbearable, spreading from his core to his limbs. They found Chen the next morning, collapsed behind his stall, alive but changed. He'd aged 20 years overnight, his hair white, his face gaunt. But the strangest part, he couldn't eat. Everything he tried to swallow felt like it was choking him. His throat constricted to nothing. Doctors found no physical cause. His wife took him to a temple, where a monk performed rituals and explained what had happened. The hungry ghosts had shared their curse with him, just for a moment, just long enough to teach him what true hunger felt like. Chen recovered, mostly, but he's never the same. Every Hungry Ghost Month, he's the first to set out elaborate offerings, not just at his stall, but at the river where the flood victims died. He spent his savings commissioning memorial tablets for the unclaimed dead, and sometimes, late at night, he still feels that cold hand inside his chest, reminding him of the price of disrespect. But hungry ghosts don't only haunt market stalls and public spaces. Sometimes they follow you home, especially when you move into a place where the dead have been forgotten. Our second encounter takes us to Shanghai, to a newly renovated luxury apartment complex in the Pudong district. What the real estate developers didn't advertise was that the building stood on the site of an old cemetery, hastily relocated in the 1990s construction boom. A young professional named Lin discovered this the hard way during Hungry Ghost Month of 2020, when the spirits came looking for what had been taken from them. In Chinese tradition, disturbing graves without proper rituals is one of the gravest offenses against the dead. When developers moved the cemetery, they were supposed to perform elaborate ceremonies, ensure all remains were properly relocated, and make offerings to appease the spirits. But this was the 90s. Money talked louder than tradition, and corners were cut. The hungry ghosts created by such disrespect are particularly vengeful. They died once, then were killed again when their resting place was destroyed. Lynn had just moved into apartment 1407, a beautiful modern unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Huangpu River. She was a financial analyst, educated abroad, and like many of her generation, she considered ghost stories quaint superstitions. Her grandmother had warned her about the building. "Everyone in the neighborhood knows what's buried there," she'd said, but Lynn dismissed it as old person gossip. She moved in on the first day of the 7th month, despite her grandmother's protests. The first oddity was subtle. Lynn kept finding dirt in her apartment, not dust, but actual soil, dark and damp, appearing in perfect circles on her pristine white floor. She'd clean it up, and the next morning there would be more, always in the same spots. Her cleaning lady quit after 2 days, refusing to explain why. Then Lynn noticed the smell, earth and decay, strongest in the corners of her bedroom, as if something was rotting beneath the floorboards. The second sign was the knocking. Every night at 2:47 a.m., something knocked on her door from the inside, not the hallway side, the apartment side, as if someone trapped in her walls was trying to get out. When she called building maintenance, they found nothing. But her neighbor, an elderly woman who'd lived there since the building opened, pulled her aside. "Don't answer the knocking. Don't acknowledge them. And for heaven's sake, put out offerings. This building, it's not right. 7 families on this floor alone have moved out during Ghost Month over the years." The escalation came during the mid-month peak. Lynn woke to find her living room transformed. The modern furniture was covered in dirt, and dozens of small mounds rose from her floor like fresh graves. Her security camera footage showed nothing, just static from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., 3 hours of dead air. But when the recording resumed, there were muddy footprints everywhere, small ones like children's feet, and handprints on her windows from the inside, as if dozens of people had been pressed against the glass, trying to get out. That's when she saw them in the reflection of her darkened TV screen. Figures standing behind her couch, translucent and gray, their funeral clothes rotted and soil-stained. Men, women, children, an entire community of the dead, all staring at her with hollow, accusing eyes. She spun around, but the room was empty. In the reflection, though, they remained, and more were appearing, crowding into her apartment, their mouths moving soundlessly. The climax occurred on the 15th night. Lynn had finally set out offerings, elaborate ones, following her grandmother's instructions. But it was too late. At midnight, her apartment door opened on its own, and they came in. Not reflections anymore, but solid, real, tracking grave dirt across her floor. The child ghost approached first, a girl no more than 10, in a funeral dress from the 1990s. She held out her hands, showing Lynn something, a photograph, water-damaged and old, of a gravestone. The name was barely legible, but the date of death was clear, 1987. "They built this building over us," the girl whispered, her voice like wind through empty rooms. "They moved most of the graves, but not all. Some of us are still down there, under your floor, under your bed. We can't rest. We can't leave. And we're so hungry." The other ghosts pressed closer, and Lynn could see they were all from different eras, some in Qing Dynasty clothes, others in modern dress. This land had been a cemetery for over a century, and not everyone had been moved. Lynn fled that night and never returned. The apartment was resold quickly. The complex has excellent turnover, always new tenants who don't know the history. But here's the ironic twist. Lin became obsessed with the forgotten dead. She spent months researching the cemetery, tracking down descendants of those buried there, organizing a proper memorial. She discovered that 17 graves had never been relocated. Their remains still beneath the building's foundation. The developer had known, but covered it up. Now Lin works with historical preservation societies, fighting to prevent similar desecrations. But every Hungry Ghost Month, she still feels them. The weight of those 17 souls, grateful but not quite at peace. Her apartment in a different district is filled with memorial tablets and offerings. She's become the keeper of their memory, the voice for the forgotten dead. Some say she's cursed, others say she's blessed. Lin herself doesn't know which, but she knows she can never stop the offerings, never forget the names she's uncovered. In trying to escape the hungry ghosts, she became bound to them forever. Our final encounter proves that hungry ghosts can appear anywhere the dead have been disrespected, even in places meant for healing. For our last story tonight, we're heading to Beijing, to a hospital with a dark secret. During the Cultural Revolution, many died in ways that left them without proper burial rites, their deaths unacknowledged, their spirits unmoored. What happens when a hospital is built on such ground? And a young doctor working the night shift during Hungry Ghost Month discovers that some patients never truly leave. Dr. Zhang was completing her residency at a major Beijing hospital, working the overnight shift in the emergency ward. It was August 2021, the 7th month, and the hospital was unusually busy. The old nurses said it was always this way during Ghost Month, as if the boundary between life and death grew so thin that more people slipped across. Zhang was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline, when she received her strangest case yet. The hungry ghosts born from the Cultural Revolution are particularly tragic. Many died in struggle sessions, in labor camps, buried in unmarked graves, or cremated without ceremony. Their families were forbidden from mourning them, from making offerings, from even speaking their names. These ghosts carry not just hunger, but a desperate need to be remembered, to have their suffering acknowledged. They're drawn to places where the living and dead intersect, hospitals especially. The first oddity happened around 3 a.m. Zhang was called to examine a patient in the old wing, a section of the hospital that dated back to the 1960s. The patient was an elderly man, complaining of chest pains, but when Zhang arrived, the room was empty. The bed was made. No sign anyone had been there. Security footage showed no one entering or leaving. But on the patient chart, in handwriting that wasn't hers, someone had written, "He's been waiting since 1967. Please help him." The second sign came an hour later. Zhang was reviewing files when she noticed something strange. 3 patient records from the 1960s mixed in with current cases. The names were marked with red ink, a sign of death in Chinese culture, and the cause of death for all 3 was listed as political. She tried to return the files to archives, but they kept reappearing on her desk. The records showed these patients had died in the hospital during the Cultural Revolution. Their bodies unclaimed, their deaths unrecorded in official registers. The escalation began as dawn approached. Zhang heard moaning from the old wing, multiple voices, weak and desperate. She found 3 occupied beds in a corridor that was supposed to be closed for renovation. The patients looked real enough. 2 elderly men and a woman, all in hospital gowns from decades past, all staring at her with pleading eyes. "Please," the woman whispered. "We've been waiting so long. No one came for us. No one burned offerings. We're so hungry." Zhang's medical training warred with her growing fear. She checked vitals. Nothing. No pulse. No breath. But they were moving. Talking. One of the men reached for her hand, his grip ice cold. "They said we were enemies of the state. Our families were forbidden from claiming our bodies. We were cremated and dumped in unmarked graves behind the hospital. But our spirits, we couldn't leave. We've been here for 54 years, watching the living come and go, and we're so hungry." The climax came when Zhang realized the truth. She pulled the old architectural plans and found it. The hospital's current parking lot had been a mass grave site in the late 1960s, where political criminals who died in custody were disposed of. Dozens of bodies, no markers, no records, forgotten by history. The hospital had paved over them in the 1980s, never performing the proper rituals, never acknowledging what lay beneath. The 3 ghosts led her to a window overlooking the parking lot. In the pre-dawn darkness, she could see them, dozens of translucent figures standing among the parked cars, all looking up at the hospital, all waiting. "We just want to be remembered," the woman said. "We want someone to know we existed, that we suffered, that we died. Can you do that? Can you help us?" Zhang made a choice that cost her career, but saved her soul. She went public with what she'd found, presenting the historical records, demanding the hospital acknowledge the burial site and perform proper ceremonies. The hospital administration denied everything, called her mentally unstable, forced her resignation. But her story spread on social media, and historians confirmed the mass grave's existence. The hospital was eventually forced to install a memorial plaque in the parking lot, and every Hungry Ghost Month, volunteers come to make offerings. Zhang now works at a small clinic, but she's at peace. The 3 ghosts visited her one last time, after the memorial was dedicated, to say thank you. They looked different, no longer starving, no longer desperate, just tired souls finally able to rest. But here's what haunts Zhang. She knows there are hundreds of other sites like this across China, places where the dead were erased from history, where hungry ghosts still wait for someone to remember them. Every ghost month, she makes offerings, not just for the ones she helped, but for all the forgotten dead, all the hungry spirits still searching for acknowledgement in a world that wants to forget. These 3 encounters across China, in Chengdu's night market, Shanghai's luxury apartments, and Beijing's hospital, remind us that Hungry Ghost Month isn't just superstition. It's a time when we're called to remember the dead, especially those who died badly, who were forgotten, who have no one to make offerings for them. Maybe Chen's illness was psychosomatic. Maybe Lin hallucinated from stress. Maybe Zhang was exhausted and confused. But then again, why do millions still observe these traditions? Why do businesses close early during Ghost Month? Why do people avoid swimming, traveling, or moving during this time? What do you think happened? Were these encounters with real spirits or manifestations of guilt and cultural memory? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia.